sort of what it is. But like the fact that we live on a flat network is going to go away. And people that have worked around those kinds of issues. So I can't access the internet. So we create entire enclaves to access the internet. It's going to save me a lot of money. It's going to let me expose applications to more users and safely. Zero Trust is the brakes on my car, right? It's going to let me move much quicker to get applications developed, to move applications to the cloud, because I'm going to be able to bake all that security into the actual Zero Trust fabric. It's going to let me have agents, like I can make those security policy decisions based on the profile of the person, of the device that they're coming from. It takes away some of those unknowns because I'm actually evaluating the security posture of all of the components to access any particular data set. And that helps me in so many different ways. But I like just ignoring all the security aspects of it. In the long run, we're going to save an incredible amount of money by being able to implement Zero Trust, because I don't have to have a bunch of duplicative architecture. I can rethink entirely about how I do networking within my, within the administration. And we likely will be able to reduce bandwidth costs. We'll likely be able to reduce, we're obviously not going to depend on choke points as much, because we're pushing where we do security much closer to the application, really to both sides of the app, like to the endpoint and to where the user actually is operating from, and making policy decisions based on that. I'm probably going to be able to reduce the administrative costs to manage security of these systems. So the cost is going to be cheaper. Access to my applications will be better, and it'll be more secure. It's a golden trio for us.
Thank you, Nick. So here's a question. This question has been around since as long as we've all been around, and it's not a struggle with just cybersecurity. But how do you prioritize with everybody's limited resources, yours as well? We could always use more people, money, and everything else. How do you prioritize what gets done first with that limitation? Nick.
Missions first. So whatever I can do, if I can choose security technologies that will make access to my applications better, faster, or easier, I'll prioritize those. So it'll be a value prop. What's the business proposition of a particular security function? I'd have to treat any security investment the same way. Is the value that I'm going to get out of it, the bang for the buck, so to say, is it going to achieve what I need to achieve, and prioritize based on that? So I'm obviously not going to spend money on marginal things or gee whiz, like that's really cool, but it's not going to give me a lot of quick value. It's not going to get me. We do need to make strategic investments, and I get that, but that's how I'm going to evaluate it. Put it on the books, do a business evaluation, do a risk assessment, and see if the value is there. That's how I will prioritize.
Certainly makes sense. How about you, Jonathan? I know your world is large and complex.
It is large and complex, and I'm happy to say I think FBI OCIO is now much more integrated with our colleagues in finance in making some of the decisions about how resources are allocated. And I'd love to take all the credit for that personally, but I think the environment I was describing earlier had a lot to do with that too. Our management very much recognizes now that some of the consideration has to be whether we're steering resources to the right things that drive our obligations to meet these compliance requirements and frankly just improve cybersecurity in general. So I have to give credit to the FBI OCIO governance team. They built a very nice formal framework for us to prioritize some of those choices. And it really looked at strategic alignment and alignment to our oversight and compliance responsibilities, the impact, especially the end user impact of any of the choices we're making, the time to realize value from the investment, and then our own execution capability. because we definitely realize that sometimes it's not just about money. It's about the capacity of teams to take that money and do the thing we're trying to do. So we've been using that pretty effectively to look at IT investment broadly, but we're also using it very much to make decisions around which cybersecurity investments we make. That strategic alignment check is really important. We have strategies. DOJ has strategies. That's something now that my boss, our associate deputy director, is asking before she approves investments. Does this align to our strategy, our roadmap for achieving things like zero trust? That's a huge evolution for the FBI and how it's thinking about spending money. And so that's been great. And then in a more tactical kind of way, we've really been trying to focus on our public-facing IT assets and making sure that they first meet some of these important standards. I know, Melinda, we've been through a few real incidents here over the past few months, and those are probably unsurprisingly affecting our most public assets. And so that's a place where I'm personally putting a lot of scrutiny and time and attention, because those are the things that are going to be reached first by a cyber adversary. So in addition to that strategic kind of prioritization we're also doing some tactical prioritization to the assets that we think are most vulnerable in a real way by being public facing to the internet.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jonathan. Roger or Gwen, anything else you'd like to add in terms of how do you prioritize given the limited resources?
You know, as Nick said, for us, it is mission first. I mean, when it really comes down to it, but it's hard to separate mission from the security of the mission. So, you know, that is the real crux of it. You know, we have focused hard, as Jonathan just said, you know, with our CFO and trying to help them understand, you know, the criticality of what we're doing. And I would say for probably the first year, we actually have gotten what I would consider a fairly significant increase, you know, in cyber or you know, IT funding in general, I guess is a better way to say it. But it's taken a long time to get here. For the last 6 years, it's been cut, you know, and finally the recognition of, you know, we can't keep cutting anymore. We've got some real issues. So, you know, that's been a great investment time-wise, I think. And we're seeing that outcome.
From U.S. Marshal's perspective, I think what Jonathan said is a lot of what we do. We have to look at both our IT investment management and then the severity of the risk. And, you know, we potentially put public-facing systems in front of our internal systems just because those are the ones that are potentially at a higher risk. So I think it's been touched on across the other responses.
Yep. Thank you. My next question is, what emerging technologies or tools are you looking at to implement within your agency? Certainly, a cybersecurity emerging technology would be on point for the question, but certainly if you have something that's interesting and emerging, we'd love to hear about it too. And how would you go about securing that? I will start with Nick.
So what am I?
Besides zero trust.
My priority is, well, zero trust is definitely a big part of it. Like I've been at DEA for a total of about 4 or 5 months. So I'm identifying all of my opportunities here at DEA, but zero trust is certainly an aspect. We're trying to look at opportunities where I can do simple stuff. Like a big value add for my users is going to be able to make sure that they can get to all the resources they need to from one place. So zero trust will get me that. But in reality, my big initiative for the next year is going to be building out, you know, a DEA mission operating system. So which is essentially a unified data analytics platform. We're going to build out our DevSecOps teams. So we're probably spending most of our resources really focusing on how do we build DevSecOps teams in a way that we can rapidly develop applications. So that's going to bake the security in. That's going to have a lot to do with how we do leverage zero trust in those environments. That's probably where we are spending more calories. Zero trust is frankly it's not easy, but it's easier to build than reordering my entire organization to support a more agile culture.
All right, good. Thank you. Roger, what about you?
I'm intrigued, let's just say, and I know you're going to be shocked to hear me say this, by some of the things that have been pushed out or being pushed out by OCIO. I normally, as you know, like to be very critical of OCIO and some of the things that you push.
No, that doesn't happen. No.
But I sit back and look. One of the things, of course, I've been around since the inception of JetNet. I think on this panel that has been here quite that long. But that was coming into play in 2003, 2004 timeframe. So almost 20 years. And I look at the potential benefits of something like Zscaler with our enterprise. For perspective, we have roughly 250 or so ATF sites, and then we have coming up close to 300 other sites this year for one of our ballistic systems that tends to be more out at state and local laboratories and other places. So, around 500-600 sites overall. And we have to provide a JetNet connection to each one of those sites. And let's be frank, when we get some of these sites that have 2 or 3 users or one ballistics machine, and we're spending, a minimum of, let's just say, $15,000 a year for that site just for a JetNet connection, there's a huge opportunity to save and reinvest in some of the other tools that we need if we can implement Zscaler right, at least in my mind. So that's exciting, and I applaud you guys for putting it out there. I just hope that we can afford it initially.
Thank you. Gwen, what about you? Anything noteworthy that you would like to share in terms of on the emerging solution side?
I think for us, we're looking at both of the things that they've just talked about, which, how do we use DevSecOps and what can we do with the whole leverage and some of the zero trust tools to maybe help reduce our JetNet bill, find more effective ways to do that, because that's one of our challenges. We have over 500 sites and, putting in bandwidth and all of that if we could reinvest and do a cost avoidance would be tremendous for us. But I think we're also, as we work through cloud and migrating to cloud, we're looking at cloud native microservices and how we do containerization. And is that going to help us does that help us from a security and a COOP perspective? But we also are helping a couple of our mission areas look at counterintelligence options to prevent threat actors from gaining information. So we've got a little bit of that going on that, may help us in the long run from a mission side.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Social engineering, it has been an incredibly effective way for adversaries to penetrate our department. It just has been. They continue to work no matter how much we've trained our folks. We've trained our folks so well that they actually will not click on legitimate surveys coming from GSA. But that's great. So it's effective. Our training is effective, but the social engineers still find a way to get through. Curious, I'll start with Roger. How are you guys potentially addressing that element of the venue of attack, shall we say?
Well, again, this is another one of those things that I actually compliment JMD on, and that is the phishing tools that you put out there. We've turned that. We made a decision early on. We aren't going to penalize people for doing the wrong thing. But, we do think that they need to learn, both personally and professionally, by the way, why some of these things are dangerous. And that program has been a huge win for us. As you say, we're now to a point where we've got people that are afraid to click on real things. I think I sent you one the other day.
Yes.
Because, a user sent me a note that, how am I supposed to know that this is real? It's been too good, too effective. But I think we've still got a long way to go, and those things continue to change. And we'll rely on J&D to kind of guide us along that path for the most part. And, we'll take advantage of those great ideas that you guys come up with.
All right. Thanks, Roger. Jonathan, what about you guys?
Yeah, I'd cite the phishing tests every month as well. I mean, we've built an enormous campaign around that here within the Bureau. I think sometimes people can over-index on the phishing test itself and its results, but I think it's one of the few things we can drive personal accountability around cybersecurity to every single employee. We're sending out 50,000 plus phishing test emails every single month. We've built a really a nice Power BI dashboard that every single division head can access to understand who's clicking on that test link. Each time a test happens, they can watch trend lines in their division. The director himself has taken it on very personally to make sure that every division head knows that poor performance on a phishing test produces real risk to the organization. He sees it enough in our cyber investigations to know it's not a joke to say that people being careless or too quick to click put the organization at risk. So it's really come straight from the top. And we've been able to use it as a vehicle to have a much broader conversation about people both at home and at work following good cybersecurity practices. And it lets us sort of present data to back that up. I think the fact that so many Bureau employees still click on every one of those tests is a good wake-up call and a reminder that nobody should be getting complacent. It's helped drive some changes to how we let external email appear to users in their inboxes based on the feedback of what works and what doesn't. And then I meet with every single special agent in charge before they go out to their new office, and that's a big feature of my conversation with every one of them. So that at every level and locally across the field, everybody's really paying attention to the issue. We've seen real increases in the number of emails that have been forwarded to our ESOC and the suspicious inbox. And it's really this idea of getting to that human firewall where people aren't just passively not damaging us, they're actually an active participant on our behalf in defending the organization. And I really do feel like those phishing tests have been a great vehicle for us to do that. It's been, in my view, universally positive. Probably less universally positive for the people who are trying to resist it every month. But I think from the chair that I sit in, there's just no downside to it. It's worked really well for the organization.
Thank you, Jonathan. How about Gwen and Nick? Anything to add in terms of any special focus from that angle?
No, I would say that with what Roger and Jonathan said, we're seeing lots of positives and people are taking it to heart. CSATs is another one, I guess I would say. It does a lot of the hit on our employee base to really remind them of things. So I think with the new CSAT that you put out this year with the videos, it just reinforces it in lots of different ways about how they need to be more protective of what they're doing and how they react. So I think those are all good things that we've seen positives. Our number of people who report potential phishing has definitely increased.
All right. Thank you, Gwen. And Nick, why don't you close this session out for us? We have about 30 seconds left.
Sure. I guess the main thing I would add, I think the phishing training is great, but as anybody that's ever ran a phishing assessment knows, you will never have a 0% click rate. Somebody will always click, and you have to be prepared for that. If you don't prepare for that failure, you're going to have bigger problems. So I think what Identity is doing, what the ICANN programs are doing to try to eliminate passwordless or password authentication is very important. Getting more towards these phishing resistant credentials is going to be more and more important, because if you don't get there, you're going to have a compromise. That's just the way it is.
All right. Very good. Well, with that, that's a wrap for our CIO panel. I hope the audience, you all enjoyed hearing from those executives that are managing the cybersecurity risk with their service delivery priorities day in and day out, and ultimately supporting our frontline mission operators to make sure that they can get their jobs done safely and securely. So with that, we will conclude this session. Thank you, Nick, Roger, Jonathan, Gwen. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support, and certainly appreciate you sharing your insight here. So everybody, we will take a short break. We will resume at 3:25 on the dot. And I am going to return the laptop to Kevin Cox. Just so you know, I did not take over his machine.